I'm 55 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I had everything figured out. I married young, raised 2 children, worked part-time at the local library, and baked on Sundays. Love to me was something quiet and familiar, the kind that sits beside you on the couch and doesn't need to say much. I never strayed from routine, never questioned what was missing, until one stormy afternoon shattered the illusion of safety. I built around my heart. I never thought something like this could happen to me. Please don't make the same mistake I did. The rain? It started with the rain. That kind of heavy early summer downpour that made the windows cry and turned the street into a dark, glistening stream. I was home alone, sipping tea near the window and watching the neighbor's hedges sway when I saw him running up the sidewalk, soaking wet. His hoodie plastered to his back. At first, I thought it was one of the teenagers from down the block, but as he got closer, I recognized him. Effin, he was Michelle and Gary's son, the couple next door. 22, maybe 23 now. If I remembered correctly, he'd moved back in with them a few months ago after college. And while I'd seen him mowing their lawn or jogging past, we only exchanged the usual neighborly nods. Nothing more than that. Until now, he jogged up to my porch, shielding his face from the rain, and knocked. I opened the door, surprised. "Hey, Mrs. Carter," he said out of breath. "Sorry I was out walking, didn't think it would pour like this. My parents aren't home and I don't have a key." He looked like a drenched puppy. His jeans clung to his legs and water dripped from the tip of his nose. I hesitated only a second before stepping aside. "Come in before you catch something." "Here." Shaking off the rain, murmured, "A thank you," as he stepped into my foyer. Shaking off the rain, I grabbed a towel from the hallway closet and handed it to him. He grinned as he wiped his hair. Didn't mean to barge in like this, just needed somewhere to wait it out. "No trouble at all," I said, trying not to stare too long. "Let me put your clothes in the dryer. You can change into something of my son's. I still keep some of his old things in the guest room closet." Ethan looked surprised a little, amused maybe, but nodded. "That would be great." Thanks. As I walked down the hall to grab the clothes, I found myself a little breathless, not from exertion. From a strange way, my chest felt tight. My husband had passed 3 years ago, and though I'd grown used to the quiet of my house, I hadn't had someone, especially a man, no matter how young in it like this. Since it made me oddly self-conscious, he changed quickly and returned, wearing a navy t-shirt and sweatpants that sagged a bit on his narrow frame. "You're a lifesaver," he said, flopping onto the couch like he'd known this house for years. "Man, your place still smells like cinnamon. I used to come here with my mom when I was a kid. Remember, for your lemon bars? I smiled, sitting across from him. "Those lemon bars are still my specialty. We talked for a while. Casual things, his job hunt. The weird state of the world, my garden." The thunder cracked now and then, and rain drummed against the windows like a ticking clock. Somewhere in the middle of our conversation, I realized how easy it was to talk to him, how intently he listened, how his eyes, a soft green I hadn't noticed before, seemed to rest on me longer than was polite, but not in a way that made me uncomfortable, quite the opposite. "I'm sorry if I'm overstaying," he said eventually, glancing toward the darkened window. "Rain's not letting up." "You're fine," I said, then added quickly, "You can stay for dinner if you like. It's just me here and I made too much soup." His face lit up. "That actually sounds amazing." And so he stayed. I set the table while he dried the dishes. I'd washed earlier. We ate potato leek soup and buttered toast, and I found myself laughing more than I had in months. He was funny in a soft, self-deprecating way, thoughtful, gentle. After dinner, we moved to the living room again. The lights were low, the kind of warm glow that made everything feel a bit slower. He sat on the rug, his back against the couch legs stretched out like a kid again. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a long silence. "Of course. Do you ever get lonely?" The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth, then closed it. He looked up at me with an honesty I hadn't expected. "Yes," I said quietly, more than I let on. He nodded, looking away, me too. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just full of things unsaid. The space between us wasn't very big, but it felt charged. I watched the way his fingers picked absently at the hem of his shirt, the way his jaw clenched slightly like he was holding back something he didn't know how to say. "I compliments used to see you out in the yard," He said suddenly, reading on the porch, "You always looked so peaceful." I invite that. I didn't know what to say. Compliments had become rare visitors in my life, and coming from someone like him, someone young, someone who noticed it hit deeper than I expected. I stood up to clear the dishes, suddenly flustered. I'll help." He followed me to the kitchen. We stood side by side, washing, drying. Not speaking, our arms bumped once, then again, and the third time I didn't move away. I looked up at him. He was already looking at me. The moment hung there, a breath suspended. I didn't think I only felt the weight of my own loneliness, the warmth of his nearness, and the quiet way he made me feel like a woman again. Not just someone's mother, someone's widow, but then I stepped back. "I should probably find you a blanket," I said, almost whispering. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, okay." The next morning, and just like that, the moment passed, but it didn't disappear. It lingered between us like the smell of rain through the screen door. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. Something I couldn't take back the next morning. The sky was washed clean. That soft kind of post-storm light streamed through the kitchen window as I poured myself a cup of coffee. I stood in my robe holding the warm mug to my lips, thinking about the night before Ethan had slept on the couch. I'd brought him a blanket and a pillow, careful not to meet his eyes too long. We hadn't said much after the kitchen moment. Just good night. Followed by a silence that seemed to echo louder than anything we'd spoken. I didn't sleep much. My thoughts circled endlessly, not just around what almost happened, but what it meant that I'd wanted it to. When I peeked into the living room, I found him awake, already folding the blanket, the pillow neatly stacked on the armrest. He was back in his own clothes, dry now, and he looked up with a soft, almost apologetic smile. "Morning," he said, voice husky with sleep. "Morning," I replied, brushing my hair behind my ear like a nervous schoolbro. I hope I didn't snore. "You didn't," I said, and then added, "You're a quiet guest." He nodded and moved toward the front door, slipping on his sneakers. "Thanks for everything, really." I didn't mean to make anything weird. I stood there still holding the mug, unsure of what to say. The grown-up part of me, the rational widow, the mother, the respectable neighbor wanted to nod, say, "It's fine," and close the chapter, but the other part, the part that had come alive under the warmth of his gaze, whispered that I was lying to myself. "It wasn't weird," I said a little too quickly. "I mean, it caught me off guard, that's all." He paused, half turned to the door. "Me too." We stood in that quiet again, like we didn't quite know how to end something that hadn't really begun. Then he reached for the handle. "Well, I'll let you get back to your day, Afan." He turned anytime you need to come by, rain or not. "My door's open there." I said it. His face shifted, the smile. This time wasn't sheepish, it was something softer, something grateful. "Thanks, Mrs. Carter." "Just call me Diane." He left and I stood there a moment longer. The echo of his footsteps on my porch fading behind the soft clink of my spoon in the coffee mug, the rest of the day passed in an odd sort of haze. I tried to keep busy, cleaned out the linen closet, watered the garden, rearranged the spice rack. But every quiet moment between chores brought my mind back to him. Why did it matter? Why did it feel like something had cracked open inside me like a window? I hadn't realized it had been shut for years that night. I sat on the porch. The air was warm, the trees still dripping from the storm, and my paperback lay forgotten on my lap. I must have been staring too long because I didn't hear him approach. "Hey!" I'd looked up, and there he was, hands in his pockets, hair still slightly damp from a recent shower. "You came back," I said, surprised at how happy I was to see him. "Didn't think you'd mind." "I don't." He sat beside me, not too close, but close enough. "Sorry again about yesterday." He said, "I don't usually do that. Whatever." I know," I said softly. "Me neither." We sat in silence for a while, watching the world settle into dusk. The porch light flicked on automatically, casting us in gold. "I've been feeling kind of lost lately," he admitted. Eyes on the horizon, moving back here. "It's like I'm in this weird space between being a kid and being a man. I don't really know where I fit." I turned to him. "I know more than you think about that feeling." His eyes met mine, and for a second I forgot the age difference. The decades between us didn't feel so wide. Not when we were both just two people trying to figure out where we belonged in the world again. I missed talking like this. I saw. You said I didn't realize how much I missed being seen. You're easy to talk to, he said, and I see you. I really do. The words hit me like a warm wave. I swallowed my throat suddenly tight. Can I ask you something, Diane? Of course, that moment in the kitchen, did you feel it too? My breath caught. I stared down at my hands for a moment, then looked up. Yes, I did. He exhaled like he'd been holding it in for hours. Okay, I just needed to know. I wasn't crazy. You're not the pause that followed. It wasn't uncertain anymore. It was filled with a quiet kind of permission, a mutual understanding that something had shifted between us and it wasn't going away. I should probably go, he said. Standing slowly, you don't have to, I replied, surprising even myself. He didn't move, just looked at me. I want to stay, he said gently, but only if you want that too. I stood then facing him fully. The porch light cast a soft glow across his face, and for the first time in years, I felt something stir in me, something alive. I don't know what this is, I whispered, but I'm not ready to close the door on it. He nodded, and so neither of us did. The next time Afan came over, it wasn't because of the rain. The sky was clear, the air warm with that late spring stillness that lingers just before summer. I was tending to the hydrangeas in the front yard, hands deep in soil when I heard his footsteps on the sidewalk. Dinner. Need a hand? He asked, and when I looked up, he was already crouching beside me. We didn't talk much at first. He grabbed a till and helped me replant one of the sagging stands. I showed him how to break up the roots. Gently, we moved in rhythm. Two people, different generations, kneeling in the same dirt, and somehow it just felt natural when we finally sat on the porch with lemon water sweat glistening on our skin. He leaned back and said, "This feels right." I nodded. It does. There was still no label for what we were. I wasn't trying to make sense of it, and neither was he. There were unspoken boundaries, ones we both seemed to sense and honor, but they didn't keep us apart. They just helped us move slowly, carefully, with intention. That night, I invited him to stay for dinner again. I made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans sautéed in garlic and olive oil. He helped set the table humming. Some tune I didn't recognize. We ate and talked like old friends. Sometimes laughing, sometimes falling into those warm, weighty silences that didn't demand to be filled after dinner. He wandered over to my record player, an old thing I hadn't used in years, and leafed through my vinyl collection. He grinned when he pulled one out. Fleetwood Vinyl Mac. I smiled. Stevie Nicks always makes everything feel more complicated and beautiful. At the same time, he placed the record carefully and dropped the needle. The familiar hum and crackle filled the room before the music swelled. He held out a hand. I stared at it. "Dance with me," he asked. It had been years, maybe decades since anyone had asked me that. My heart thudded as I stood and let him guide me to the center of the living room. The furniture became background. The walls faded, and all that existed was the hush of the music and his hand on my waist. We swayed slowly. I felt the warmth of his breath near my ear, the gentle press of his hand between my shoulder blades. I rested my cheek lightly on his chest and closed my eyes. "I don't want this to end," he murmured. I didn't either. When the song faded, we didn't let go right away. Our embrace softened, but our hands stayed connected. I pulled back slightly to look at him. "What are we doing, Ethan?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away. He searched my eyes like he was trying to find the words. "I don't know," he said. But it feels honest, and it did. It felt unexplainable, but not wrong. I led him to the couch. We sat close knees, touching the quiet stretching between us again. Only this time it was full of questions we weren't ready to answer, then his fingers brushed mine. I looked down at our hands, then up at his face, and I let them stay there. I've spent so many years trying not to feel. I said, trying to be okay with being alone. I didn't think I could want this again. "You can," he said gently. "You do my heart." A little surprise pounded in my chest. It was too fast, too strange, too unexpected, but it was also real. No pretending, no roles to play. Just the raw truth of wanting connection in a life that had grown far too quiet. He leaned forward. Not forcefully, just a question in his eyes. I didn't answer with words. I kissed him. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was tender. A quiet acknowledgement of everything that had been building between us when we pulled apart. His forehead rested against mine. Both of us breathless. "Diane," he said softly, "I'll never do anything you don't want ever." "I know," I whispered. "That's why I'm not afraid." We didn't go any further that night. We just sat together, hands laced, hearts open. He stayed on the couch again, but this time the air between us was warm with understanding, not uncertainty. And as I lay in bed, I didn't toss and turn with guilt or confusion. I felt calm. Something had begun, something real, and I didn't want to run from it anymore. The days that followed moved slowly, gently, like waking up from a long sleep and remembering how to breathe. Ethan didn't come over every day, and I didn't expect him to, but when he did, it always felt like the world grew quieter, softer, like everything in my life before him had been written in pencil, and now somehow things were being inked. In one afternoon, I found myself sitting on the back porch with a glass of wine, the late sun casting long golden streaks across the lawn. I heard the side gate creak open. He'd learned not to knock anymore. He walked in with that easy confidence, holding a small box in his hands. "What's that?" I asked, setting my glass down, a little surprise. He said, placing it on the table inside was an old Polaroid camera, the kind I hadn't seen since my kids were young. He smiled as I stared at it, then pulled something else from his pocket. "A new film cartridge." I figured he said, "If we're making memories, maybe we should keep a few." I laughed, touched more than I expected to be. "You really are something." He raised the camera and pointed it at me. "Say that again, but slower." I rolled my eyes but smiled. Click, the photo slid out with the software, and he waved it in the air. I watched as the image slowly developed me, smiling shyly, hair a little messy from the breeze, one hand resting on the table, the other tucked at my side. I looked older than I felt, but happier than I had in years. Later, we sat on the grass in the backyard. The sun dipped low, and fireflies began their quiet, blinking dance around us. He lay on his back, hands behind his head, while I traced invisible circles on my knee with one finger. "You ever wonder what people would say?" I asked quietly. He turned his head toward me about us. I nodded all the time, he admitted. "But I also know this. No one else is living this life for us." I looked at him, really looked at the way his eyes glinted in the fading light, the calm steadiness of his voice, the strange wisdom that lived beneath his youth. He wasn't trying to play a role. He wasn't here out of some fleeting thrill. He was here because he saw me and stayed. "Anyway, I'm not naive." I said, "This, whatever it is between us, it won't be simple." "No," he said, sitting up, "but it can be honest and beautiful and maybe even worth it." I didn't reply right away. I reached out and took his hand instead. "I want to stop waiting for perfect," I said, and finally. "I've waited so long and I'm tired." He pulled me gently toward him. I rested against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath my ear. That night, we didn't talk much more. We just stayed there, curled together in the hush of twilight, while the world outside our fence carried on, unaware of the small, quiet miracle happening in my backyard when he left. Later, he kissed my cheek. Not rushed, not questioning, just present. And when I locked the door behind him, I stood in the hallway for a long time holding the Polaroid photo he'd left on the table. It was me. Yes, but somehow more than that, it was a moment, a version of myself I thought I'd forgotten. Hopeful. Open, quietly brave. I placed the photo on the fridge, not to remember him, but to remember me, because that's what love can do. Real love, even when it comes in an unexpected form, it reminds us who we were before the silence and who we still have a chance to become. I don't know what the future holds for Ethan and me, but I know I'm not afraid to find out.